Mr. Rotimi, Prof talked about returning to the, how do you put it, development plans. Now, looking at the development plans, there are several. Right now in Nigeria, there's a ERGP that the current administration has been running with. Now, some have looked at it, some have said it's a good document to run with. It's a question of implementation, and some have seen loopholes there. But let's look at the question of the economic growth rate of about 2.1 or thereabout, I'm not too sure. And the population growth rate, as Prof has talked about, the population is growing, and you mentioned it earlier as well. How do we balance all of that?
Thank you very much, Neota. I think first things first, just from where you started off, development planning, we have an ERGP, but you also spoke, you were spot on when you said implementation is the challenge. Nigeria is not short of brilliant plans. We have very bright, very brilliant people who have dissected, who have profiled solutions to the problems of Nigeria. We have always fallen short in the area of the political will to implement. So if you use that as a background to your next question, which is around our population is growing at a rate of about 2.9, almost 3%. Our economy is currently growing at about, for last year, I think 2.2, 2.3%. Now, it is clear that the average Nigerian will not feel the impact of any movement, any positive movement in economic growth, simply because we are giving birth to too many people and the resources and the value we are creating as an economy is not sufficient. You know, up until 2014, if you go back 5-10 years, Nigeria had typically been growing at an average of about 7%. We have the capacity to grow easily if we put all of the right policies and we implement them to the letter. We have no business growing at a rate that is lower than 10%. Ghana next door is growing consistently at about 9%. Ethiopia and a lot of other African countries are growing, have significantly high GDP growth rates. So two things to do: plug the leakages, implement to the letter all of the policies. The ERGP is a fantastic plan. When it was launched 2 or 3 years ago, we were told that on a regular and a consistent basis, government will be coming to the people and showing us the scorecard, that this was the target for Q1 2017. We have achieved it 50, 60, 70%. The variation that is there, this is what we will do better the next time. Let us hold government a bit more accountable. On a quarterly basis, come to the people, tell us what you have done, what challenges you faced, and let us put heads together. If the plan needs to be amended, let us amend it. Now, if you put the right policies and implement those policies, you will see an economic growth rate that is 6, 7, 8, 9%, and it starts ramping up. What can we do about population growth? This is where moral suasion, this is where the religious institutions, this is where the traditional institutions need to play an active role. Our population is getting out of control. Extreme poverty is endemic all over Nigeria. It is fueling insecurity, and in an era of insecurity, foreign direct investment will not come. Local investors also will be hesitant. There are Nigerian entrepreneurs who will not do business in certain states of Nigeria today. So everything is interrelated.
Professor, taking a cue from this point, what do you think we can do about population control, given our strong ethnic sentiments and everything else?
Well, you know, whenever you have population explosion, I think it is a manifestation of other deep-rooted fundamental problems. So trying to control the population in itself without actually addressing those fundamental problems, it may not actually work. Before I venture into that, let me make a slight correction relating to what my colleague said. The growth trajectory that we have had previously that goes up to 6-7%, is what I call opportunistic GDP growth arising from massive injection of oil dollars into our economy. So it is not a productively oriented GDP expansion, but an opportunistic one. Why? Because if you look at the oil sector and its proportionate percentage of GDP, it's less than 10%. It's 9-point-something%. So it means other sectors of the economy are actually far more contributing to the GDP growth rate relative to the oil sector. So our concentration should be more on the non-oil sector, particularly the productive sectors of agriculture and industry that have the capacity to significantly employ more people and therefore generate more wealth and expand the GDP. And unfortunately, if you look at the trajectory of foreign direct investment coming into our economy in the last 4 or 5 years, it's more or less opportunistic foreign direct investment into venture capital and stock exchange. And our economy doesn't necessarily need that kind of foreign direct investment. What we need is for the government at all levels to work hard toward attracting productively oriented foreign direct investment that actually inject resources into our economy in agriculture and industry, and that cannot happen until you have the right set of policies. And this is where the contradiction associated with the ERGP manifests itself. Let me make this point very clear. Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is not a national development plan. It's a federal government strategy document. What we call National Development Plan is a compendium of clearly defined policy goals, objectives, targets, but most importantly, those policy goals and targets are now converted into projects and programs that have been fully costed that cut across national economy at federal, state, and local government level. So ERGP, let me make this clear, ERGP is not a national development plan. And that is why I have been consistent, and I'll continue to make this noise, that if we want to develop as a nation, we must go back to the culture of national development planning, where developmental interventions across sectors are characterized with mutual complementarity and not competition, as what we have seen today. If you look at what has been happening in the last 4 or 5 years, the wrangling at the National Assembly over budget between the executive and the legislature, if we have a national development plan, all this problem will not have arisen. Because when you have a costed national development plan for 5 years, in the process of submitting the budget, you isolate specific incoming years projects and programs, send them to National Assembly for validation, and maybe do some element of amendment arising from inflation that will not take you more than 2 months at most, because you need to also bring the performance of the previous budget and see what need to be adjusted. So the valuable time that the executive and legislature have been dissipating, which should have been used for productive purposes, institutionalization of policies and programs, and thinking out of the box towards pursuing sustainable development and prosperity.
Prof, if I may come in here, Prof.
Over
I'd like to ask
constituency
you
projects and then other unnecessary time-wasting activities.
Okay,
so
Prof,
we need to change that
You
attitude.
need to clarify something here, Prof. You said the ERGP is not a national development plan. Can you quickly clarify on that? What's the difference between the two of them?
As I said earlier, if you look at the ERGP, it clearly defines sectoral objectives, it has strategies, but it has flagship projects. And Nigeria is not made up of federal government alone. Nigeria is a federal republic composed of 3 tiers of government: federal, state, and local government. And that there is no single developmental intervention you will undertake at federal level and can do it successfully without complementation from the state and the local government level. Let me give you a simple example. If you want to construct a dam, federal government does not own land. The dam has to be in a given state. And dams nowadays can have multi-varied uses. You can use it for water supply, power generation, and irrigation. Now, if you have a national development plan, you can actually disaggregate the implementation of the dam construction in such a way that you share responsibility between the federal, state, and local government in such a way that collaborative and coordinated funding can make a project that will last 7 or 8 years to be completed by the federal government to be completed within 2-3 years. And that is what we have, or what we need to have as National Development Plan. If you took issues relating to health, if you took issues relating to education,
Professor, one of the challenges we've had with national development plans over the years, if you would remember, is that every national development plan terminates with the government. And once that government ends, another one comes up with its own, programs and all of that. So we have a problem of continuity of such plans. Mr. Rotimi, that's something that should give anyone, some measure of concern. How do we circumvent that? It doesn't seem like we have a national vision or national ethos that every government that comes into office is compelled to follow through with.
Well, I think it is really about engagement, constructive engagement. Like Professor said, there are 3 tiers of government. Even within the federal government, there are tiers: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. What consistently has been a source of problem is the lack of synergy between the various component parts. My view is this: it is important for us to institutionalize a lot of our policies and projects. And one of the ways to do that is ensure that there is legal backing for a lot of things. So if you identify a particular solution, so public-private partnerships, for example, there is a legal framework that governs activities in that space. That legal framework is the law of the land that will be obeyed at federal, state, as well as local government level. We are still coming back to political will to implement. We are not short of statutes. A lot of the challenges and the dysfunction you see intra and across the different agencies of government is simply because there is no political will to move in a common direction.
In other words, you also talked about engagement the other time. There was something you alluded to the other time about fuel subsidy and all of that. You were saying that, which in a way
has to be removed.
Yeah, that you said that needed to be taken. That suggests fuel price increase, which was also alluded to by Ms. Makrewani.
We have been hiding behind one finger for a long time. We keep looking for new ways to describe petroleum subsidy. So the current nomenclature is under recovery. But the fact remains, landed cost of a liter of petrol into Nigeria, the last time I heard, was in the region of 190. With this recent spike in oil prices, maybe it is 200 naira. We are selling at 145 naira. There is a 55 naira deficit. The government of Nigeria today, through the NNPC, is absorbing that 55 naira. Now, that is being done in the eyes of government to cushion the adverse effect on the people of a price increase, right? But the reality is this: the same government that requires the resources to put together the social infrastructure that we need as a people, the physical infrastructure that we need to build an industrial base, an industrial economy. So bottom line is this: the fuel subsidy has to be removed. What government really needs to sit down to do is, what kind of measures can we take to soften the blow on the most vulnerable part of our population?
Okay. Prof, if you can just weigh in on this real quick, the likelihood that there will be fuel prices, as alluded to by Mr. Bismarck Rwani.
Well, you know, generally, whenever you operate an economy that is dependent on fuel importation, and the prices of oil keep on changing in international market, certainly the debate about subsidy will never stop. Because whenever you have the slightest increase in the prices of petroleum in the international market, it will certainly reflect on the landing costs of the refined petroleum products we are importing into the country. Maybe thank God that Alhaji Aliko Dangote's refinery is about to come on stream, but the fundamental question is, if you remove the subsidy, you increase the prices of fuel, and its attendant negative impact of the economy, can it be lower relative to the positivity associated with leaving the fuel subsidy? That is one question.
Prof,
Number two,
Prof, I have to leave it at one question. Thank you so much. Prof, would like to say thank you so much for being a part of the show this morning. I'm afraid that's all we'll have to end the conversation at this time. Professor Nasibi Abdullahi Dharma, development economist, and Mr. Baya Rotimi, economist and financial consultant. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts with us.